All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating 100-year-old blueprint for something we see all the time now: modern career death by accusation. It's this wild story about fame, panic, and the sudden total destruction of a Hollywood legend. And honestly, it set a precedent that institutions are literally still using today.
We live in an era where trial by media is, well, just a daily occurrence. You know the drill. A headline drops, the internet completely explodes, and someone's career vanishes overnight, long before a courtroom ever even gets involved. But where did this ruthless institutional machinery actually begin? To find the exact origins of this playbook, we have to rewind over a century, to 1921, to the very first major scandal that proved Hollywood was perfectly willing to eat its own just to survive.
Part 1. The Million-Dollar Comedian.
To really grasp this, we have to look at the sheer, undeniable scale of his fame. Between 1916 and 1921, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle wasn't just famous, he was the absolute highest-paid actor in the entire world. He'd originally signed a $1 million 3-year contract with Paramount, which, by the way, was the biggest deal ever at the time. By 1921, he had just signed a brand new $3 million deal with them. I mean, we're talking Charlie Chaplin-level fame here. He was the undisputed king of Hollywood. And look, he earned that top spot because his talent was just undeniable. He wasn't just a star on screen, the guy was foundational to Hollywood's very DNA. Despite weighing 300 pounds, he was incredibly athletic. He could easily do backflips. He actually invented classic slapstick staples like the iconic pie-in-the-face gag. He directed over 100 short films and seamlessly transitioned into directing and starring in massive feature films. But beyond all that, he worked like the clock was ticking to build up everyone around him. He discovered Buster Keaton and gave him his start, and he even mentored comedy legends like Chaplin. He was an absolute pillar of the industry.
Part 2. The Scandal and Trials. Now, what's wild here is the relentless speed of this whole ordeal. It kicks off on September 3rd, 1921. There was a party at the St. Francis Hotel out in San Francisco. A young actress named Virginia Rappe fell ill, and tragically, she died 4 days later of peritonitis. Within days, on September 11th, Arbuckle was arrested and accused of rape and manslaughter. As you can imagine, the press just exploded. He went through this brutal legal gauntlet. Trial 1 in November ended in a hung jury, with 10-2 actually voting for acquittal. Trial 2 in January of 22 ended the exact same way, 10-2 for acquittal. The media and the legal systems had just converged on this single hotel party with terrifying lightning speed.
Which brings us to the absolutely astonishing conclusion of that third trial in March of 1922. After deliberating for, get this, only 6 minutes, the third jury delivered a not guilty verdict. But they didn't stop there. They went a step further and provided this unprecedented, incredibly dramatic written apology directly to Arbuckle. They stated on the permanent record that an acquittal wasn't sufficient because there was not the slightest proof against him. That is complete and total legal vindication.
So the crucial takeaway here is this craziest, stark dichotomy between the legal reality and the press reality. On one hand, you have absolute innocence in the eyes of the law, right down to a historic jury apology. But on the other hand, he was already declared guilty in the court of public opinion. The Hearst papers had just run wild with the outrage, and despite the formal acquittal, Will H. Hayes, who was the new head of Hollywood's self-policing office, banned Arbuckle from the screen under his own name. His films were literally pulled from theaters entirely. Part 3. 3 Engines of Outrage. To really understand how this happened despite a full acquittal, it helps to break this historical hysteria down into 3 specific buckets. It was this perfectly designed machine, what we could call the Arbuckle scam machinery. It was made up of the media engine, the institutional engine, and the cultural engine. Let's look at how each one played a part. First up, the media engine. The massive Hearst newspaper empire needed a villain, plain and simple, to drive circulation. A headline screaming, "Fat movie star kills girl," was guaranteed to sell papers by the millions. For the media back then, the facts absolutely came second. The primary objective was outrage and profit. They established the precedent right then and there that public outrage sells way better than legal verdicts ever could. Next, we have the institutional engine. Right around this time, Hollywood had just formed the Hayes office. The industry was terrified of looming government censorship, so they were incredibly desperate to prove they could police themselves. Their primary goal was pure self-preservation. And their tactic? Well, sacrifice one massive, highly visible star as the ultimate example. Hollywood learned a very dark lesson here. It is infinitely cheaper to kill one person's career than to risk the entire industry. And finally, the cultural engine. You have to remember, the 1920s were a time of intense moral panic. Anxieties over flappers, bootleg booze, sex, they were rampant. And cultural panics always demand a scapegoat. Arbuckle became the forced literal face of Hollywood decadence for a panicked public. It just didn't matter if it was true or not. He fit the exact narrative the culture demanded at that moment in time.
Part 4: Exile and Quiet Comeback.
Now, unlike today, Arbuckle didn't have a social media account where he could just go live and tell his side of the story directly to the public. And he certainly had no union to protect his job. He just had the Hayes office telling him, "You're done." From 1922 to 1932, he was forced entirely into the shadows, directing comedies and writing gags under the pseudonym William Goodrich. He never even got to direct his protege Buster Keaton again. In 1932, Warner Brothers finally gave him a real chance, releasing 6 hit shorts under his actual name. This led to June 29, 1933, when he finally signed a major deal with MGM to direct feature films again. But then, in this incredibly tragic twist of irony, that very same night, Arbuckle died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was only 46 years old.
Part 5: 100-Year Hollywood Legacy. Let's pull back for a second and look at how this ripple effect builds across the entire century. Starting right there in 1922, studio contracts fundamentally changed. Through the mid-20th century studio system, executives knew to drop stars fast to protect the brand at all costs. And moving all the way to 2025, we can easily observe the mechanics of the modern cancel culture playbook, relying on this exact same blueprint, where trial by media vastly outpaces the eventual facts. And this brings us to a massively important institutional change that you've probably heard of: the morality clause. This standard contract provision was created as a direct result of the Arbuckle case. It legally restructured Hollywood forever. It allowed studios to drop stars instantly for PR reasons, regardless of legal guilt, simply to protect the brand. This single 100-year-old event ensured that the institution always protects itself first.
So Arbuckle leaves behind these two beautifully tragic, contrasting legacies. On one side, we have the pioneer, the man who practically built modern physical comedy and nurtured the industry's absolute greatest legends. But on the other side, we have the test case, the industry's very first sacrificial lamb, proving once and for all that institutions will readily destroy an individual to preserve their own power and avoid oversight. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really think about modern outrage. Look at the headlines you scroll past today and ask yourself a serious question. It's been over a century since the Arbuckle test case. Has our media playbook actually changed at all? Or is our current system just running on a 100-year-old script? Definitely something to think about the next time you see a trial by media unfold.